Hey, what's up, guys? I want to make a real quick video about tubeless tires and particularly preparation, both as you're riding and training, but also for travel events. So if you ask anybody on the internet, everybody's going to say traveling with tubeless tires is a pain, but it's not really. You need to be prepared. So this is a video particularly for that. I'm also kind of catching wind that maybe some of you guys aren't as prepared as we could be. Just even if you have tubeless tires, I want to make sure you guys are just on a daily road ride or whatever, in addition to your phone and ID and money and all the usual safety stuff, make sure you have a plug kit here. And I'm not going to get into how this works, but there's lots of different brands and varieties out there, and that's just too long for the scope of this video, but it's super small, easy to do. So because tubeless tires don't mean you don't get any flats, it just means it seals up the smaller flats. But if you have larger holes that you need to plug, that's where this comes into play. And if you've had a larger hole, you're probably going to lose more air and you need to replace the air, hence the CO2 and the valve for that CO2. In addition to that, if you are using CO2, it'll work with most, even the stands, as I'm looking at the stands here. It'll work with most sealants, but if you, for example, if you're using stands and you have to use CO2, you will need to replace that stands because it will basically kind of freeze and shock the sealant, and so it will need to be replaced after you use it. It just says that on the website. But you can also use a CO2 compatible sealant, such as Muck Off, for example, is CO2 compatible, no issues there. But again, you can pretty much use anything in an emergency and it will get you home. But for everyday riding and when you're traveling along, just make sure you have these things with you. Now, for travel considerations, first and foremost, air pressure only drops about 10 psi at 30,000 feet, which is typical, cruising altitude for airliners. So you don't need to fully deflate your tires so that it comes off the bead of the rim. Just drop them down like 10 or 20 psi, and it'll stay on the rim, keep all the fluid in there. It won't be messy, so on and so forth. So you don't feel like you have to fully deflate your tires and then reinflate them on the other end. Now, with that being said, if they do get deflated or if you need to change your fluid or something happens while you're traveling, this is where the booster tank comes into play. Many of you guys know, now if you have a really tight, well-fitting tire, oftentimes you can still just use a standard pump, like your travel pump, and get it to reseat on the rim, the bead onto the rim, no issues. But if you're like me, you can't get it to seat with a standard track pump or whatever. I have to use a booster tank, and that's a lot of people are kind of in that similar situation. Now, Milk It is a brand, it's my favorite one because it is the smallest and the lightest, and it works really, really well. You just use your standard pump, you hook it up to it, pressurize this container to 140 psi, and then you put this on your valve with the valve core removed, and then boom, it blasts your tire and seats everything in, beads the, or gets the rim back on the, sets the bead onto the rim, and then you can inject your fluid and then pump it up like normal. So this is only, I think it's like maybe $50 on Amazon or something like that. So not really expensive relative, but it also doubles as a water bottle. So this top part unscrews, and then here you can screw this back on, and literally it doesn't take up any more room than a water bottle. It's extremely lightweight, actually probably about the same weight as our plastic water bottles. But so anyways, I'm saying that because it doesn't take up extra room in your bag and in your stuff. Also, when you travel, I would recommend taking spare valves. You never know when one of those are going to break or get clogged up or whatever, and they don't take up much room. Of course, spare sealant just in case. I would actually travel with maybe 2 of these bottles, depending on how much you like to put in your road setup. I put 2 ounces per tire, just because I like to be a little extra thorough. And then finally, the injector here, I like the injector from KOM because it just has these tubes. They're inside, you can't really see them, but it has tubes that allow you to just nice and cleanly put sealant in, take sealant out, etc. Now, if you want to check the fluid level of your tire, you can actually use this for it. This tube right here can actually, you can stick it down through your valves now, but not all valves are created equal. So you got to take it to your bike shop and find the valves that are just wide enough, because a lot of times what happens, they'll go through the valve, but if you look at the bottom here where the rubber, sorry, you can't really see it through the bag, but where the rubber kind of seals in, and these in particular, so I have the ones that I have installed on my mountain bike, but this fits all the way through, not that one, this one. This tube fits all the way through the valve with the valve core removed, obviously, all the way through the valve, and then you can retract the this injector here, get all the old sealant out, and then reinstall the new sealant in the exact amounts and quantities that you want without ever having to take the tire off basically, and just keeps it super clean and simple that way. So that's my travel recommendations. Again, takes up these can go in your water bottles that live on the bike cage. This can go in your backpack, and you haven't cost any extra room in your luggage. So that's it. So just to summarize, everyday riding, make sure you have a plug kit with CO2, or a frame pump is fine if you want to do that. And then of course the valve that goes with that. Ideally CO2 compatible sealant, but you don't have to have that. For travel considerations to races, remember you don't have to deflate your tire more than like 10 or 20 PSI. You don't have to completely deflate it. That will save you a lot of hassle on the other side. The injector, I recommend, obviously extra sealant, you need that. The booster tank, unless you are 100% confident that you can just use your travel pump to get your tire reseated, and then also some spare valves and cores. That's it. All right, so hopefully that helps as we get into travel race season here, and we'll see you on the other side. See you guys.